So, the insurance industry is so probability driven and math driven that I imagine you've been playing in the machine learning space, the deep learning space for quite some time.
Yeah, so we always kid around, but we say Clara Analytics is the OG. We've been using machine learning and AI even prior to the current wave of LLMs. We use a hybrid mix of everything from traditional machine learning all the way up to advanced capabilities of LLMs and fine-tuned models.
So the question becomes, and sorry about this, we'll have to, we'll fix it in post. What did you think when you saw something like when ChatGPT hits the market, when all of these new AI tools hits the market, as somebody in an industry that's been using some of these, like, when you think, oh, this is amazing, did you think, oh, this is hype? What was your initial reaction to it all?
I think like most people, you're skeptical of using a new tool, and it's really, really hard to frame how you felt 2 years ago versus what's happened in the last 6 months. The pace of change and the rate of new capabilities being launched by Anthropic or OpenAI has just been incredible. And we just have an incredibly hard time keeping up. So when you look at what you were doing with ChatGPT potentially 2 years ago versus what you can do with Claude Code today in terms of creating a planned workflow, deploying an agent that interacts with employees or with customers, it's a world different than it was even 2 years ago. So it's hard to judge because even people that are getting started today, that are really just quickly adopting these tools, see a completely different world of what it looked like 2 years ago.
So in that, in this era where 2 weeks things are just constantly shifting, constantly changing, how are you evaluating what tools you are willing to let in to your process versus what you're, approaching more cautiously?
Yeah, for Clara Analytics, we obviously work in the insurance space. So we're heavily regulated and we have a lot of compliance. All of our AI has to be governed and predictable as much as possible. So we don't wing new tools, we evaluate. We are an AI native company. So we have data scientists, machine learning folks. So that's just part of the core of how we build things is understanding the characteristics, the non-deterministic nature of how outputs are generated and putting evaluations and experiments in place to understand where's the variance. And then we also put in guardrails. So our core platform has guardrails integrated so that we evaluate the outputs, we have gold data sets, and then from those gold data sets, we can evaluate whether it actually improves the intelligence that we build into our products as well.
You've been using these tools since before, the advent of the Claudes. Your frameworks, I imagine, can accommodate a little bit better.
So we're at OG, we started with doing traditional machine learning. So most companies, that's a huge value for us. The reason is because we started out with strong statistical models. Those models are then validated based on the outputs that we have from machine learning. Those act as a gold data set for validating those outputs. Now we have years and years of machine learning outputs that we can use to feed into more non-deterministic flows in LLMs. So then we can put evals that are guarded and guardrailed by grounded outputs that we have years worth of.
It's the guardrails and regulations, but it feels like government regulated and the people that are trying to get more government regulations are actually the things that are going to help move these tools into a usable system. Like, the frameworks that you use, are any of them applicable to other CTOs, other industries, the new guys that are starting up and integrating them?
I think 100%, but I think it's what I would call it as a playbook. So it's a playbook of when you look at how we've built our solutions to ensure that you get deterministic outputs, there's guardrails, we evaluate over time and benchmark and grounded data to make sure you have good quality intelligence as being presented to the adjuster. I think that's a playbook that you use, for example, if you're in OpenAI when they're building OpenAI Health. That same system that we built with grounded data, characterizing the data, building statistical models, then opening it up to LLMs, and then evaluating the outputs that you get from LLMs and what guardrails you put in place to guide, in some sense, to guide what the path is that the LLM takes through navigating the interaction with the consumer. It's the same playbook in some sense. It's just applied to a different industry.
I feel like in most of the development that's happening, and this is as an outsider, and I think a lot of outsiders feel this way, that probabilistic outcomes are being presented as deterministic in many ways. Like it's the, we were talking about this before, these chat engines, these LLMs are built to be credible, not right.
Correct. I think there's the differentiation is if you're interacting with an LLM, as people will say, it will lie with a very high degree of confidence. In systems that we build, we provide intelligence, predictions. Those predictions, there's a human that evaluates those results and takes action because of them. That's a choice that we've made in terms of the products that we built. That's a choice also that OpenAI, Anthropic, Gemini, or Google or Microsoft make in terms of the way that they build user interactions with their LLMs. Right now, the primary interface for that is a chat. Our primary interface is interacting with data and workflows. That's very different in terms of the products that we build. And there's a human that's involved in, we synthesize data, we summarize content, we have predictions that we show, but a human looks at the grading and the scoring and it's benchmarked and they understand those benchmarks enough to say, okay, I will now approve this decision that you're making as a system.
The application of wisdom on top of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how much have these tools affected classic productivity from your team? Are you able to produce faster? Are you shipping more product right now?
Yes, I would emphatically say 100% yes. I think that what we all struggle as engineering leaders is to really fully understand where does that productivity and velocity come from. It's certainly easy to generate code now. It's hard to evaluate whether it's still great code, whether it's building meaningful outcomes for the company based on the products and capabilities you build. So we've leveraged a couple of different frameworks that are out there to try to understand where do we get that productivity from. We do a lot of surveys with our engineers. Are they getting more productive in terms of code generation, test case generation, to understand where that comes from? And at the end of the day, software development is a team sport. So we also have to look at when we can generate code and build product faster, where does it put back pressure on the rest of the system that's being used to build? So it goes back to specification, having a clear clarity around the roadmap. How do we prioritize? How do we evaluate quality in the products that we build, making sure that we have test automation coverage. So it's not just that one slice, it's the full spectrum of how do you create a roadmap, define the products, and make sure that it ladders up to building outcomes for your customers.
How do you keep from blue skying yourself to death? Like that's something that I'm hearing more and more, because when you can do everything, what framework do you use to decide what you should actually be spending your time doing?
I'm a big fan. Still a big fan of, I don't think AI changes the nature of having the thoughtful conversations around what you need to build that's thoughtful and drives the company forward for outcomes for the company. So what we do is we still hunker down and we do roadmaps. We understand what's a priority. We understand what we need to build for our customers. That's the voice of the customer. AI doesn't replace that from an engineering perspective for us. So we focus on making sure we have a clear roadmap in terms of what moves the needle forward. It certainly allows us to move forward a lot faster and potentially build better quality for those things that we want to get out into the market.
How big is your team?
We have about 35 people in the engineering org.
How are you trying to figure out what an engineer looks like in 6 months, and then how to get them there? Like a lot of CTOs are constantly kind of struggling with. You like your team, you don't want to let your team go, you want to build on the skills of their team. How are you, and you have to keep your team motivated, obviously. How are you approaching that?
Well, I think in general, the great engineers are curious by nature and they love to learn. So this is an amazing time for them to be in, because using LLMs unlocks a lot of kind of toil that they would have had to deal with traditional software development. So I feel like in general, great engineering orgs are already incentivized to use these tools and move faster, and figuring it out as a team. And we've done pretty well at that, I feel. The harder part is knowing what fast looks like and what good quality looks like when you can now get everybody aligned with using Claude Code. You can generate a lot of code very quickly. Now making sure you've got eyes on it, making sure that you've got your automation built, and everybody feels good about the pace that you're building at. I think we're working through that of making sure that the pace at which we can build, what we have on the roadmap, what we want to build, and what we put in front of customers is good quality and meets the original intent of what we wanted to build, because we are moving pretty quickly.
Which speaks to, let's call it the validation era of AI. Like,
Yes.
we're all trying to figure out, like, what are the ways that we validate? What are the ways that we benchmark success one way or the other?
Yeah.
How long until, like, I feel like we're just at the beginning of that phase. Like, if we spend all of this time in context and complexity and and everyone agrees now, oh, outcomes, like, we really need to focus on outcomes. Okay, outcomes are great, but how do we validate those outcomes are actually delivering, and in what time frame are we evaluating?
I think, like most companies, at the end of the day, it's a very customer-centric focus. Like, are customers happy with the product? Many companies choose to run NPS surveys. What's our bug escape ratio? Do we have new bugs going into the product? Can we remediate them faster? I think there's very grounded measures that you can use. Are customers churning? Are they seeing you continue to deliver more value in your product potentially faster, that they don't see another competitor that can outpace you? I think that's the general pressure that's happening in Silicon Valley now, is everybody has access to these tools. It's a level playing field. Can you continue to build and deliver the customer value that somebody else can't build and displace you in kind of a very competitive market?
And how do you, there's a fine line between improving things constantly and changing shit that people are like, well, you changed my thing. Why did you change my thing? And now that we can change things at such a fast pace, are you ever worried that you're going to be throwing too much at your customer to get an accurate evaluation of your product?
Yeah, we work in an industry, in the insurance industry, the adjuster workflow. It is a human-driven workflow. I can only speak to what we build, but we obviously have to include our customers as part of getting new capabilities out there. We have to make sure that they're trained. So again, this is where AI creates back pressure in other parts of the delivery chain that we would ultimately want to move faster, but the customer can only learn new capabilities, learn new features so fast. I think every industry will have different variants of this based on customers using tools. You would see this as well with tools, that consumer tools that you use. If it changed every day, you would be frustrated as well. So now the back pressure is really understanding where's the customer sentiment based on the pace of change that you can introduce to them, and can they keep up?
That's a fascinating concept, because what it actually speaks to is, I'm always looking about where's the anxiety coming from.
Yes.
From not just the engineers who are obviously, struggling or getting laid off. That's obviously anxiety laden. Not every human is an early adopter. A percentage of humans are early adopters. And now we are all sociologically being told we're all early adopters now. And a lot of people are very uncomfortable with that.
The way that I approached it with my engineering org, this was starting, it's hard to even evaluate because the last 6 months have been the highest rate of change based on the models that came out in kind of the December, January timeframe. And for us, it's around the time when Claude Code matured to the point where it is the de facto standard tool that every engineer uses to build to varying degrees across the way that we build. I think the thing that I acknowledged was when I noticed what was happening with the quality of the tooling, I think we all feel it. There's a bit of an identity crisis. I've been in the industry for a very long time. We're all grounded on my experience adds this kind of value to this organization. What if now you feel like somebody can prompt you and the value that you add to a team and displace you? And that is, if you look at the layoffs that are happening, that starts to feed that narrative in a lot of people's in their own personal way that they work. So they don't have trust. They feel like they might be displaced. The things that they added value for many, many years before as senior engineers may now be something you can simply prompt. So what we've tried to tell people is create a safe space of, we are going to, the point of this is that we're not trying to display skills. We're trying to learn a new way of developing, to your, what you were mentioning earlier, is like, what does it look like as we learn to get better at development, build better product, build outcomes for our customers faster, make customers happier in terms of the way that they use our product. Let's focus on those outcomes, and that will ultimately allow us to drive the business, because we have plenty of ideas that we can act on to make the product better and build new capabilities for customers.
What's the vibe like?
For us, it's pretty positive. I would say we just ran a survey, and more than 80% of the team is super happy with the tooling that we use. They're happy with the way that we're adopting the tools in a very thoughtful way. We put in guardrails and the way that we're approaching the build. That's for my team. I think other teams feel maybe certain kinds of pressure from management or the board to adopt tools faster, or maybe unrealistic outcomes. We expect about a 20 to 30% lift in productivity or velocity every quarter based on maturity of our adoption or the tools. I know other leaders are expecting 2x, 3x, 4x, because they see, if you spend some time, there's obviously a lot of dubious claims that are happening in the industry about, if you adopt these tools, you can get 2, 3, 4x. When would you actually achieve those? We're trying to chart that path. I run a lot of surveys to get feedback. What can we do to, to be more thoughtful and gain insights about how do we use the tools? It's just the engagement style. I think it's just the nature of the way that you have to work through adopting a new tool.
I think something, between Anthropic making more money than they ever thought possible, / Intuit and Facebook and all the layoffs that are happening here, everybody is thinking about, okay, where are the jobs? What am I going to do for a living? At the same time, anecdotally, like, there are more software engineering jobs out there. There's more hiring happening in certain sectors, but there seems to be a little bit of paralysis around, I don't know, like, I would hire. I don't know exactly what I'm hiring for yet. And so as a CTO kind of existing in that space, something I'm asking people is like, all right, you have all the money in the world, you don't have to worry about that. Like, who are you hiring for?
Yeah, there are two things. So we focus on people that are super comfortable with ambiguity. Things at the rate of change, you could have something that shows up that's either on the roadmap or something in a new product capability that we want to build, or even in the tools that we use, that creates a lot of ambiguity, and that can make people uncomfortable. How do I get my job done while I'm learning a tool, and there's expectations that we move 2x on something that gets defined very, very quickly? If you compress time, you get into spots where you're like, I have to figure these things out for myself. I don't have all the traditional specifications that I expected. And so we look for engineers who are very comfortable operating in that kind of environment where they can navigate the unknowns, learn things, and also work with business partners around making sure they have the details enough that they can create those kind of the way of the work kind of very dynamically. On the flip side, we look for learning velocity. So that is the ability for engineers to learn while they do. One of the hardest things that you can do as an engineer is accept a deadline for building something very, very quickly while you're using new technology and while it's not typically spec'd out to the level that you would want. Now you're navigating a lot of ambiguity and you're learning something new, and you're expected to still deliver at the same time, which is a lot of pressure. So we look for engineers. One of the things we ask of, can you cite an example where you learned a new technology while you were delivering a very ambitious project? How did you navigate that? How do you learn? We obviously, for the high caliber engineering orgs, engineers are putting in additional time outside of their traditional workload to figure out these tools and keep up with the industry. It is just reality. The people that survive into the next wave of what does engineering look like, they're going to be the ones that put in that time and energy to stay on top of the tools, learn them as they build, and adapt as they go.
This is, which is not what engineering teams were built on. Like, I think about the superstars of engineering of yesteryear. You watch Silicon Valley. It is the, the Dune-style Mentat logic engine guy who can simply, lock in and code for 72 hours straight. And now it sounds like it's actually, the Adderall-laden ADHD guy who is comfortable in chaos, will figure out the way through, and is fun learning how to do disparate things.
No doubt there's dopamine hits for a certain category of engineers who feel comfortable with the pace at which you can move using something like a Claude Code. Because it does, I see a certain subset of our engineers, they're like, oh my God, like I was able to build this thing in a weekend. And they actually feel that the capability open up, that they can now, they're not blocked by other specialties or capabilities that they traditionally would have been blocked by. They can now build a front end if they're a back-end engineer. They can now provision platform capabilities if they're a front-end engineer. It is unlocking all these capabilities that maybe they were traditionally blocked by. And so now it's starting to also collapse skill sets where one person can cover a lot more territory and stuff that they want to build.
I'm thinking about skill tree leveling up video game analogies that kind of fit in
Our
here.
rubrics are collapsing. Traditional roles are collapsing. Agile's being challenged. How do you navigate all that? That's a lot that's going on in the industry.
At some point, it will settle, I feel like. At some point, I would think you settle, like, this is what the new normal is. This rate of change can't continue in a society that functions.
I think it's hard. We know that there will be a new version of what the rubric looks like, what skills, what titles we use. They're starting to change as well. And I think if somebody says they know what it's going to look like a couple years from now, they're literally just making it up. I don't think we could tell. I think part of it is we're just in the middle of all this and trying to work through it. I don't think you can really make a call to say exactly what it's going to look like a couple years from now. Maybe that's my point with my engineering team, is that we know we can build better. We know we can build faster. We know we can improve the outcomes for our customers and for the company. Let's just focus on that, working together as a team, navigating all this together. And we're making adjustments and calls based on the dynamics of everything that's changing around us. And that's really where I lean into, is just the navigating of all the dynamics of the way that things are changing.
Control what you can control and accept the fact that the only way out is through.
Right, yes.
Thank you so much.